Welcome again to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. I'm Clyde, one of the 6 Dharma leaders we have here. So take a moment to kind of stretch if you need to. We have 22 people signed on, plus I'm sure there's some other people out there with them. So welcome, everyone. I need to go. Seems in the road right here. We'll see how it goes. Well, tonight we start our series. We're going to do a 4-week series on the 3-part training. And tonight, I'm going to be doing kind of an overview of overview of not just a 3-part training, but also what are we training for? Why are we training? And that includes what we're going to be talking about tonight. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about tonight is the 4 Noble Truths. And if you have been around for a while studying this, hopefully it'll be a good review for you. You should know most of this or been exposed to most of this already. If you're new to the Buddhist teachings, these are the beginning teachings. These are the basis of our whole practice, is what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks. In fact, tonight I'm going to start out with the first discourse. And this is when the Buddha, after Buddha was enlightened, he was reluctant to teach. Then he was decided to teach. He met up with some monks that he used to know. And this is from the Samyutta Nikaya 5611. So the Buddha taught, this is into the discourse. This is just part of it. He says, now monks, this is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering, union with what is displeasing is suffering, separation from what is pleasing is suffering, not to get what wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. So that's the first noble truth. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving that leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for non-existence. It's the second noble truth. The third noble truth. Now this, monks, is the noble truth of the sensation of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and sensation of that same craving. The giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-attachment. The fourth noble truth. Now this, monks, is the noble truth, the way leading to the sensation of suffering. It is the noble eightfold path. That's right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So those are the 4 noble truths that he first talked about. And we're going to kind of look into each one of these and a little bit more to see about these. So what it is. The first noble truth. And the first noble truth, it says this is suffering, because we hear suffering, we usually call this suffering, the origin of suffering. The cause of suffering is craving. There is a way out of it, and that's the Noble Eightfold Path. But this gives us a little more details of what they're talking about. And I do want to talk about suffering in a minute, because when you first come to Buddhism, before you hear life is suffering, well, I want to go back to another sutta that is related to this, and it's about the handful of leaves. And Buddha was out with some monks one time, and he was in a forest. They called it a grove, a forest. And he reached down, he picked up a handful of leaves, and he says, monks, are there more leaves in my hand, or are there more leaves in the forest, in the trees? And the monk said, well, obviously there's more in the trees than there are in your hand. And the Buddha said exactly. He said, so too, monks, the things I have directly known but have not taught you are numerous, while the things I have taught you are few. And why, monks, have I not taught these many things? Because they are without benefit, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the spiritual life, and do not lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. Therefore, I have not taught them. So what we're saying here is that he's not saying everything is suffering. He's saying what my teachings are focusing on suffering, because what is that? That's the way out of suffering. He wants to teach the way out of suffering. So even though he says, this is all these things are suffering, this is what's important. If you want to suffer less, this is what I'm teaching. So let's look at each one of these. He says, the first noble truth: birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death. To me, that sounds a lot like being in this body. If I'm born, I have suffered from illness. I am aging. We have this aging, this whole thing of illness, death, this union with what is displeasing, being separated. What I've experienced being separated from what I like, what I want. All of this has to do with suffering. And when we talk about suffering too, suffering is called dukkha. It can be translated, suffering can be called as a dissatisfaction. It could be agitation. It could just be annoyance. It could be discontent. So it has a wide range of what suffering, when we say suffering, when we say dukkha, it could be just an annoyance. Unsatisfactoriness is probably a better way to describe it. Then we have the idea of the origin of suffering. It's craving. We have this idea of craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, seeking delight here and there. And to me, this idea of craving is driven by the three defilements, and that's greed, hatred, and delusion. These are three things that are operating, and it's hatred, it's ill will, it's ignorance. These are operating, and they're operating in the context of our lives where we have the three factors of existence, which are impermanence, it's imperfect, it's suffering, and it's impersonal. In other words, I'm trying to make a permanent self here. And if I try to attach things and hold on to all that, it's going to create suffering. So this idea, this craving, this is craving. That's the cause of our suffering. The third noble truth is just the sensation. It's non-attachment, but being able to see where we're attached, be able to see the clinging, to see the attachment. And this is one of the things you'll hear a lot in here: letting go. We are practicing to let go. And we don't let go all at one time. This is a practice. We're practicing this over time, letting go a little bit, letting go a little bit of this, letting go here, letting go there. But it's this practice of letting go. And then we come to the last piece. It tells us, how do we let go? We let go through following the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, sometimes you might have heard that they talk about that sometimes he teaches in terms of a doctor. There's the disease is compared to suffering. That's the disease, the symptom of the disease is suffering. And then there's a cause of the disease. You go to the doctor and say, well, yeah, there's a cause for this. It's clinging. That's the cause of the suffering. He says, but guess what? There's a cure. We have a cure for this. And the Noble Eightfold Path is kind of like the medicine. You have to take it. And I'll tell you, someone is describing someone, we're kind of taking, like you get a sinus infection. You can't just take the one pill. You have to take it over a period of time, and you have to keep taking it. Well, that's kind of what we do. We're taking it every day for our lifetime. But sometimes you can think of it as that way. He's kind of a doctor. He's prescribing this. So that's the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the start of this. This is why we're doing this. So we want to look at what's the three-part training. Normally I like to give, I like to tell people to start at what something is, but I wanted to say, we talk about the three-part training, and that is the Noble Eightfold Path. And it's divided into three categories. The first one is sila, and that's the ethical part of this, virtue, discipline, this idea of ethics. It encompasses the right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So that's sila. The second part of the three-part training is samadhi, and that's right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. It's kind of samadhi is translated as concentration, but it's kind of like a calm abiding, a peacefulness. The mindfulness is all within there. The third part of the three-part training is wisdom, and that's insight. And that embodies right view and right intention. So we have sila, samadhi, and panya, which is the wisdom. I might have said that wrong, but panya is the last part, and that's wisdom. So you might kind of wonder, why is it gone this way? Why does he teach it this way? Well, if we go back to the really basis of why we suffer, the big word there is ignorance. We are ignorant of the way things are, the way life is, the way things are. And to counteract ignorance, we need to get to wisdom. Well, to get to wisdom, to allow to be calm, to see the arising, the way things are, we need to have a calm mind. And that's where the concentration comes in. That's why we are mindful, to be able to see the clinging, to see where we're creating. I see a lot through mindfulness and the concentration and the mindfulness to see where I create my own suffering because I see where I'm clinging to something or holding on to something or anger arises. I see that happen. If I can see it, then I can start to let that go. But to be able to have a calm mind, to sit in a calm mind, to sit here, I need to be a good person. I need to be ethically doing the right thing. In other words, if I'm out here stealing or telling lies or treating people badly, it's going to be hard for me to come and sit and meditate. Because as we generate this stuff, as we are, if I'm acting with telling lies and things, it's going to be hard. I'm going to keep doing more of that, and it's going to come up in my meditation. So we need to start out with this idea of this sila. In fact, Bhikkhu Bodhi says that when the Buddhas first started teaching, when people would come to him for his teaching, when new people would come, that he would start extolling things, such practices as giving and moral discipline. He would extol the beauty of such virtues as generosity, harmlessness, honesty, and self-restraint. So his first teachings were on generosity. I mean, think about it. Generosity, that's giving. That's the first part of giving. Letting go is generosity. It's a practice of generosity, practice of letting go. So we have these three parts now. We have the three-part training going on here. We have our ethical, our discipline, how we live our life. Then we come in and then he would start teaching about mindfulness, how you sit and meditate. That involves the whole Satipatthana Sutta, and then the concentration. And then we have wisdom, the right view and the right intention. Now you may have noticed something there. When I first when I said, here's what the Buddha taught, he taught, but how did I say it? When I said the Noble Eightfold Path started out with right view, right intention. It started out with the wisdom piece. But then when I just said the three-part training over here, where does the wisdom piece come? It comes toward the end. And so it's kind of like, well, you know, did they get it wrong in one of the places? Why did they do it that way? And this was a kind of a new learning for me to a certain, I kind of knew both of these, but I never asked it why or looked into why. And so Bhikkhu Bodhi here again says that right view provides the perspective for practice and right intention, the sense of direction. And when I looked at this a little bit more, if we look at, it's kind of saying you kind of got to know why you're going somewhere. When you get in the car, you just don't take off. You don't know where to go. So that's why the right view has two parts to it. It has a superior right view and a mundane right view. And the superior right view is just in knowing that that's where you're almost enlightened. You know, that's the Four Noble Truths all over again. The mundane right view, though, is the law of karma, understanding karma. This is why this works. This is why if I act with wholesome intentions, I will have wholesome results. I'll suffer less. So we need to, if I act with unwholesome intention, if I don't live ethically, and I create more stuff, I'm going to create more suffering for myself and others. So we need to understand why, kind of tell me, why does this work? Why does this practice, what we're doing, work? Well, it's because of the law of karma. So we need to understand that first. It's a different way of looking at things. But what about right intention? What do I need to know about right intention? Right intention has to do with renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. And I looked into this. This was interesting to me. The idea of renunciation, us letting go, is that the way he's describing things, and this is out of Bhikkhu's Buddy book also, is that it's contrary to the way the world works. We look for happiness through sensual pleasures, hanging on to things, wanting more, not wanting things that we don't want. And that was a way of doing of that. Is seeking happiness by pursuing peoples and objects. And he's saying this renunciation is turning away from craving. It's a different way of being in the world. Turning away from craving and becomes the key to happiness. So he's saying, we're going to be doing this a different way, people. And I'm just letting you know up front, you need to know this before you get started on it. So it was a different way. It's a different way of being. And we have to kind of, okay, he's kind of given us that idea ahead of time. So that's why I think that's why Bhikkhu Bodhi thinks that when the teachings you hear, when you hear the Noble Eightfold Path, you're going to hear right intention, right view and right intention, and then right speech, and then you get into the seal, and then you get into the concentration pieces at the end. But what we're going to be doing over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be starting out with Sila and looking into that much more. And then we'll be doing concentration and then wisdom. Bhikkhu Bodhi, he also goes on, he says that these are, even though we call them, the Noble Eightfold Path, you think of your steps, he calls them components. Comparable to the intertwining strands of a single cable that requires the contribution of all the strands for maximum strength. With a certain degree of progress, all 8 factors can be present simultaneously, each supporting the others. So even though we learn this, we kind of have a method for teaching, is that as we work with this path, the training, this is a practice, this is the training, it's not a straight path. It's like that twining that he talked about. I used to talk about it as a spiral. If I live ethically, I can concentrate better, and then wisdom, insights can arise. And as insights begin to arise, as I get a little bit more wisdom, when I see where I'm clinging or craving, and I can start letting go, I can see the law of karma action, and so therefore I can act with more wholesome intentions, and I see the benefit of that. Then I'm calmer in my meditation practice. I begin to see things. So it all works together. And then I get a little bit more wisdom. Maybe I'll have another insight, or I'll see something that I can begin to see the karma. I'm going to begin to embody the Four Noble Truths again. And you'll notice when I said in the Four Noble Truths, in right view, is really embodying the Four Noble Truths. So you have that within the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, is the Four Noble Truths again. So it's all together. So these things can work together as we progress on the path. So join us as we start next week, looking into each one of these training sections, the 3-part training, and we'll be getting a little bit deeper dive into each one of those. So thank you.